So, greetings, everyone. I came to understand social injustice when I got my first television news job in the heart of the Mississippi Delta. And while I was only there for less than a year, the stories that I covered and the realities that I saw really left an important and indelible impact on me. So I'm Rhonda Bannard, and I am the founder and executive director of Earth Gives. And in a way, we are here, we exist to deal with inequities, and that is the lack of funding for climate justice, which is at only 0.5% of all philanthropic funding, and climate and environmental work that you all do at just 2% of all philanthropy. And yet, as we all know, it's the most consequential issue of our time. So we're here as Earth Gives to build a community of Earth Givers in all the ways that people can imagine. And unique to this conversation today is that it's about a community of people who care also about their neighbors next door and their neighbors in the global South. So these monthly community commons sessions for environmental nonprofits are in the support of the nonprofit ecosystem. You all are working on the front lines. You have your ears to the ground and you understand what's going on. So you are the most important voices to expand on things like Diandra is going to share with us and what you all might be able to contribute over the coming months that we have when we meet in these sessions. We have an amazing leader who I've been following for quite some time, even prior to sort of getting my 2 feet into the climate realm. And so I'm going to let her introduce herself because she might want to expound in ways that a typical bio doesn't, right? How can we even imagine that captures our essence or who we are and why we are here to serve? So Diandra Marizet Esparza will share a little bit about her journey and who she is and what she's up to. Then I'm going to pepper her with some questions. Joshua and others, if you're interested in weighing in, feel free. And then we're going to open it up for questions for everyone. So scribble your questions as we go, and then we'll go from there. So Diandra, please take it away.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It is so great to be in the Zoom call where I get to see y'all's faces and everyone can talk. Those are my favorite. But it's nice to meet all of you. I'm Diandra Marizet Esparza. I use she, her pronouns, and some of you look familiar. Mayra? For some reason, I'm like, you look so familiar. Uh, but I'm calling in from Los Angeles. I've lived here for a year. And these are lands that have been traditionally stewarded by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples, past, present, and emerging. I'm originally from Texas, a little bit of a coastal cowgirl, but moved out here to be closer to the community that has been helping me build IE for the past 4 years. We're super passionate about our community who have really just used storytelling and art to amplify the voices of the environmental movement, more specifically environmental justice movements. And we're super proud of our community that we've built. But just a little bit about me, I am a really passionate writer. Cultural research is absolutely my jam, and that's how I like to approach a lot of the resources that we create over at IE. I love community organizing, and I also really love poetry. Surprisingly, poetry, I think, has been a really grounding tool for me during the past 4 years and really continues to be my chosen artistic medium when it comes to processing all that is the environmental justice movement that we each have to endure. And hopefully, I hope that the work we do at IE helps people really embrace their own artistic mediums that they love as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
So what is intersectional environmentalism?
Sure. Yeah. So hopefully a few people have maybe heard the definition by now once or twice. If we're doing a good job over at IE, maybe you have. But for those of you who are catching up or haven't heard it just yet, intersectional environmentalism, it's really meant to be an inclusive version of what we traditionally think of environmentalism as, which would be a version that advocates for the protections of both people and the planet by identifying the ways that injustices that are happening to folks on the margins of the systems that we design, are really connected to the ways that the earth is impacted as well. So it's a definition that really helps us see how harm to people and planet is deeply, deeply connected, rather than placing humans and critters and living beings on these varying hierarchies that we maybe are accustomed to seeing in our school textbooks. I don't know about y'all, but like the image of the pyramid with all the critters, it like comes into my brain right now. And because environmentalism has kind of historically evaded social justice issues, which is related to the protection of people, IE really brings injustices done to the most vulnerable communities and the earth to the forefront of any given issue. So it does a really good job of not minimizing or silencing social inequality so that we can truly advocate for justice for both people and the planet.
Fantastic. So I'm looking at my questions in advance, so my apologies. But obviously, environmental work is incomplete without social justice, and people, we make up the systems that are at play. So if we started with just an organizational structure as all of us representing nonprofits, what might be an example of how we can incorporate it? And I know the true sense of it is that it should be in the DNA and then comes up. But give us a sense of like organizationally how we might embrace it.
Yeah. This question comes up a lot in our, so IE has a consulting arm that I think a lot of people don't know about. We're trying to be more vocal about it on our website, but we have a consulting arm where we try and help people within the walls of corporations understand that so many of the policies that we have today are either, like, if we identify them as policies that aren't the most progressive or maybe aren't meeting the needs of communities today, it's likely because they maybe do have either colonial origins, or maybe they were policies that were created that didn't come from intersectional review processes and analysis and community stakeholder feedback. And so I think that something that it seems, based on heads nodding, that I can maybe say in this room is that the revolution of our political and policy systems and workplace systems, they will not have 501c3 status. And so I think what I mean by that, and what I want people to remember, is that so many of the really basic policies that we value today, our rights to engage in voting, the days that we have on work, the workplace protections that we have, all of these policies that we kind of take for granted sometimes every day, they have come and been birthed out of historical movements of change, out of people who are willing to disrupt systems. And so that's a place, I think, just understanding and really appreciating, having an appreciation for that history is the first place that I really, really encourage teams to explore. So if you're a team that works in industry XYZ, really understanding how historical movements of change have led to the really basic policies that we kind of take for granted every day today is so important, because then it really unlocks our capacity to appreciate movements of change that are happening right now. I think we kind of get like brainwashed a little bit into entering organizations and really considering it this professional space that has these policies in place that are just living in this like alternate universe of like workplace structures and systems, but they are a reflection of the demands that people have historically had. And there's so much love and appreciation to be had for past movements of change. And I think that's a really powerful place to start.
So I think what you're saying is to bring in that history, to bring in that knowledge building within an organization, and just the basics, so fundamentals, right?
100%.
So
Especially when
stay,
oh, sorry, I was just going to finish with, just to be a little bit more clear. I think just even having like basic historical trainings with teams, that's like, here is how today's, like, not even just our organization, just workplaces and organizations in general, thanks to racial, queer, feminist movements and beyond, these are basic print like policies we have now that we just don't even think about because of the work that those movements have done. I think that as we're engaging with like this new landscape of environmental justice movement making that's happening right now, to even be able to equip teams with the capacity to digest what's happening now, it's important for us to understand how all of these things that we take for granted today were achieved in the past. And so I think that's a really powerful place to start.
great point. So staying with this idea, how do we think about this as it relates to programs? Because a lot of, some of us work internally in an organization and some of us go out and serve community. And so in making an impact with our programs and our efforts, how do we think about that?
Yeah, I think just from like a show of hands, and I know that there's like a Zoom hand too if you have your if you have your camera off, who is directly working on like community programming at their organization? Anybody? Couple people. Okay, very cool. Yeah, so I think I'm probably speaking to the choir here. So hopefully this just feels affirming for a lot of you. But I think that when it comes to programming, it's really not about reinventing the wheel, and it's more about breaking down these traditional expectations of white saviorism within philanthropy. And what I mean by that, I think there's a lot of ways to unpack that, but one thing I'll hone in on specifically is that the folks who are equipped with leading programming, I think we come into workplaces thinking that we have to be these really influential leaders and we have to be these innovators and we have to have these big grand ideas. I think that is completely wrong. I think to be an effective leader in a community programmatic space, really your top skill, your top talent should be excellent facilitators of community stakeholdership. You should be an excellent facilitator of space. You should be a bridge maker. You don't have to be this quote unquote, I can appreciate the idea of thought leadership, but sometimes I think we kind of take that really far, right? And we tend to lose community voices within that. So I think that instead of thinking of programming as people behind the scenes with these big grand ideas that are kind of reinventing these wheels, it's building effective community programs that are led by really talented facilitators that can help uncover what community needs are and how to match those needs with tangible and feasible and sustainable ways that an organization can show up. Because I also think we end up also wanting to make a big press splash, and sometimes companies want to come in, do something really meaningful and impactful, but maybe something that's really only sustainable one time. And while that can be valuable, we see so many organic mechanisms in community that are more so rooted in things, frameworks of mutual aid, that I think people think businesses and organizations can't participate in. And I don't think that's true. I think that excellent facilitators know how their organizations can meaningfully continue to engage and support and become a sustainable part of a community. And so, yeah, that's my hot take on what makes a good programmatic leader, and what we need to see more of within organizations.
Joshua, I think this is a great time to come to you since you raised your hand and you're out there doing a program. What might be your thoughts there? Like, how do we integrate this into our program work?
Thanks, and thanks, Diandra, for those amazing comments. I think that a lot of the times I've been on both sides. I've been on being a grantee or being a community sort of a program, working with communities on programming, and also being in a fund and supporting communities. And I think a lot of the times what those who work on I would say on the sort of enabling side, whether as funders or partners, most of the excuse would be that either they didn't know or they were not aware of a certain need that a community might have had, or their partners had, which they were not aware of. And I think in most cases that can be greatly avoided if they would just look within themselves. So to Deandra's point earlier around how you build some of these things within your own organization, I think that is the first point for us. So if you look inward within your own organization, how do you treat your junior staff? How do you treat those who are not part of your even professional staff, but are general staff or other partners you work with or consultants you work with? And when I say how do you treat them, it's cutting across how do you include them in your strategic thinking about the organization, your vision for the organization, how do you treat them in terms of workload wise and compensation wise, health and well-being, and what resources are available to them for them to make sure that they are thriving. If you do all these things from a very intersectional lens, realizing that the cleaner contributes equally to the organization as the executive director, because if they do not work, the organization would not function properly if everyone shows up at work and the toilets are not working, and other things you need to run a smooth office is not also operating, or the tech
Joshua
person is not around.
Amponsem, APN.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so that is very, very important. And if you do these things, what happens is that when you're working with communities or community partners, you almost outright think that beyond whatever service you're providing to them, you already think about the other cost that they would incur beyond the programmatic cost that you're partnering with them on. And I think that is what we do at the Youth Climate Justice Fund, because in supporting groups for their programs, we are also thinking they need resources for a retreat, to have a space where they can develop their strategies. They need to get coaching services for their staff, for their well-being. They need support in conflict resolution as they work with other community members, particularly also in areas where there's so many cultural sort of diversity and they have to go through different cultural phases with partners. And I think that is so difficult for other funders and partners to realize, and only might commit resources to the actual program cost and not these other things, which are very important for them to be successful in their programming. So for us, I think the first set as recommendation to most organizations and philanthropic entities we work with is, how do you do this internally such that all your staff immediately think about this when they are talking to other people? Because then it's very easy for them not to say that, oh, I wasn't aware, because you cannot expect that people who are quote unquote in a very tight financial situation or might be desperate for resources would have the confidence and the power dynamics to come to you and say, oh, I also need this and I need that and I need this. It's almost very difficult and so sort of undermining to assume that they would have the capacity to ask for everything. But if you practice these things, you actually make it easier by going to them and being like, oh, by the way, I saw that these things were not included in your ask. Have you thought about them? Have you considered them? Is there a way that we could, have a conversation about this, which opens the door for them to bring some of these things forward? And I think that, we all say that we want to leave the earth a better place than we found it. And we all think of very grand things. And I always say that it's always about the very, very micro things you could do around you that make things much easier and smoother for the partners you work with, as opposed to designing another grand big project or program. Yeah.
Thank you, Joshua. So you teed up my next question, great, but Diandra, did you want to respond in any way to what he just shared?
No, I mean, I think that was well said. Ditto to everything. The only thing I'll add that's maybe kind of fun and silly, but I think reiterates the point is I was scrolling on Instagram this morning like I wasn't supposed to, and this influencer that I follow that makes really fun, silly content was at one of the student encampments, just supporting student protesters, and was talking about here in the US, and was talking about how small they felt at first, just holding a lamp for the students at night to be able to like cut food or like do something really small. And they shared this little reflection about how they felt that they needed to do this like big grand thing because they're like a person with a platform, and certainly they were doing that too, but they talked about how important they realized, like looking out on that like whole setting, just seeing the role that they were playing and then the role that everyone was playing, cutting and building tents and repairing things and taking care of people and feeding people. And it really is about community integration and mutual aid. And I think that even though it was like a silly little reel, Joshua, what you said about towards the end there about just like, it really is about the small actions that compound together. I think that as a whole, programmatically, it's important that we're asking questions about how we're supporting those pre-existing ecosystems that just like really organically feed off of each other. So yeah, I just thought I would add that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So I know, I'm trying to think of doing a quick scan. And by the way, thanks for joining us, Alamendra and Sean. We happy to have you. So just as people come from all walks of life, so do organizations. Every organization here is very different. Some are bootstrapped, some are volunteer driven, some have big budgets and teams that can do all of these different things. So knowing that, and it doesn't matter what size you are, it feels like we're always trying to keep the door open, in sustaining our work. What might you offer, and certainly Joshua as a funder as well, what might be a variety of ways that knowing that sometimes it's just a board running the show, or one, executive and then a board, or a team of volunteers. You just talked about the small. So what are those small things that we maybe can do, understanding the differences of our organizations?
Yes. So I, let's see, which route do I take this? I think that I have myself worked within the walls of, larger organizations where maybe there's smaller groups within that are really about it, like progress, environmental, social, intersectional, all the things. And then there's, the groups that are not so into it, not so aware, still on their journey, right? I think my hot take, this is another hot take. I'm just giving you all my hot takes. My hot take is that it is worth focusing internal growth on the people who are ready to take a step, and focusing less on people who are not, and growing movements within until they become indisputable. In other words, maybe it's evidence, something, maybe you're creating evidence and it becomes so indisputable as a result of the passionate work that you're able to do. A program becomes so successful that it can't be ignored, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list goes on, right? So building things internally that cannot be ignored. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people will come to IE and say, hey, we really want to do intro to IE trainings. And we'll say, okay, cool, right? And they'll usually, some really passionate person that will be like within the walls of organization XYZ will come to us and say, hey, I'm just letting you know transparently, there are going to be some people on the call that are just like super fans and really excited, really about it. And then there's going to be some people who are really resistant, maybe a little intimidated, et cetera, et cetera. And in instances where those trainings were mandatory, the majority of the time, I think the training is less effective than when it's not mandatory. I do not, hot take, I do not think that these trainings should be mandatory. I think it's more harmful for everyone involved. I think it's critical that people be brought into these conversations by way of invitation. One, because I think everyone's psychological safety is important, and it's a journey, it's a unique journey for everybody. And two, I think that if you are not there yet on your journey, you will slow down progress. And so I think that is like a reciprocal approach that everyone can adopt. I've certainly, through IE, through our training program, have been able to really experience that alongside teams firsthand. I think it's much more effective to make sure that people feel invited in, as opposed to, or just you spark curiosities as opposed to forcing people into a room or a training. Of course, like technical training still have to happen, but that's like neither here nor there. And I've also seen that happen within the walls of like fashion brands and other corporations as well. So that is, that would be my recommendation. But Joshua, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm just quickly gonna add that I think that most of the people who make big decisions within big orgs that influence all of us are people who tend to make those decisions based on experiences, and they are mostly quite narrow-minded in a way that they focus a lot of their career on something, they make a lot of money or build power, and hence they do not have too many experiences, which means that every little experience they make big decisions out of it. And that is to say that I can't even count the number of sort of rich people I've met who started a funding program because they once went to somewhere in Africa and saw something they didn't like. And okay, they started fund and they want to do something about it. And they don't have the time to even look into the context very well. But the thing is that little experience can really change their mind very quickly. But then as they do this, they do not have enough time anymore to build more experiences within those issues. So what we do at the Youth Climate Justice Fund, especially when we work with funders and they do not fund youth, or they do not really want to do intersectionality because they are so focused on we need to solve the energy crisis and it's going to be just energy, and we try to get them to think about energy from an intersectional point of view. The way we do that is taking them on a journey from the point of their comfort. So we really try to build a relationship, create events that they're excited about, and then try to build the experience they would have made if they would have traveled to, say, Indonesia. We bring one of the community grantees from Indonesia into that room to interact with them. So they are comfortable to be in such a space. It's a space that they are very, free, and they feel comfortable and they don't feel any pressure. And then giving them those experiences of people exposing them to the context of why just renewable energy isn't really a solution if it's just in the end big corporates putting them on houses and taxing houses locally. Then you have access to energy, but then people who really need the energy cannot afford it, right? Or if you have big agricultural revolution in Africa that kick out all the smallholder farmers, which means there's food available, but then the actual money that come out of that revolution is for big corporates and not the actual smallholder farmers we're trying to actually support. So giving them that then really creates an opportunity for them to reimagine what their program officers and program directors can then later go to them and say, the example that happened at that event, this is really why we want you to reconsider why we cannot fund this way or how we cannot move money this way. So really creating those experiences and getting them to sort of meet people who are really doing the work on the ground is very important. The second thing I would recommend is something around how you can slowly also recommend to have advisory boards that are more external than the organization itself. So since we started our work, we've managed to get a few funded philanthropic entities to have youth advisory groups or more community-led advisory groups to support their work. And this is really like a huge sector that we need to change, because most funders that we come across who want to focus on a particular region, particular issue, do not have people from that actual field on their board. It's a bunch of funders and a bunch of either just scientific experts or whatever on that board. And that doesn't help, because then you're looking at it purely from what is on paper perspective, and then the intersectionality is gone, the justice element is gone. It's because we know that we need to reduce carbon by this amount by 2030. Everyone is just going in and wanting to plant trees or whatever, but that in itself, the justice element is gone, the equity element is gone, and the people power is also gone. And the more you can get some of these groups to really invite community-based groups, community-based leaders to join their advisory board, which is non-contractual. They don't really have to listen to them. They could also ignore all the things they say. But what it does is that we are influenced by the things we hear and the things we imagine. And the more that you can get these people to get closer to sharing with them stories and painting a picture for them, the easier it is for the staff of the organization to actually work with the board later on to change the way they do things. So those are the two things I will add, which we practice, and it's been very instrumental for us.
Joshua, you're constantly setting me up for my next question. Good work. So I want to open it up for questions after this sort of next one, and just allow dialogue. And of course, I invite everyone to be on camera if you're comfortable doing that. But as I said off the top, I come out of the television news industry. And so my life has been spent in thinking about words and messages and story. So I even come to the work of Earth Gives around community building. And the more, even in this space, the more I realize that there's language that creates the barrier. Even a simple one in my state of Arizona, where I'm trying to advance a composting legislative initiative because it reduces methane, which then, I mean, you know, I think it was 100 degrees yesterday. I'm used to that, even though I'm originally from Canada. And, you know, so I'm used to the desert heat, but still, we have over 800 people dying last summer. And you know, those are the marginalized communities, the unhoused community, and all of that. So to take glory from the fact that you know, our city has set up the first heat, you know, department is a little sad. You know, you can look at it in a couple ways. So composting, a lot of people don't even know what it is. But if you said food recycling, you know, that's great. And then when you talk to funders, they say, well, we want to invest in underserved communities. Well, who's going to adopt it first? It might be, you know, the middle or higher income, but the landfills are next to the, you know, underserved communities that don't have a voice. So it's like, it's this weird intermixing and juxtaposition. And then we hear language like just transition and all these terms that people don't understand. And so, Joshua, as you were saying in your explainer there, you're trying to tell through story and get people to like see themselves in something else or connect or understand terminology. And in my early research, I found that one of the reasons why climate and the environmental nonprofit sector is not funded as well is because it's a hard story to tell. And there's all these layers versus the arts industry being, you know, I'm not sure why they suffer, but you can say, well, this is the ballet and this, you know, people can like understand that a little bit better. So knowing that it's our language, it's our story, it's our, you know, the information that we share and the terminology that we share, what can you both offer up for all of us to speak more about the intersectional environmentalism and climate justice and those issues?
Joshua, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the mistake I did when I started fundraising, doing my environmental work. I work on compost as well, so big hats to you, Rhonda, for that work because it's super important. But the big mistake I do, and a lot of people still do now, is talking about climate from a very either doom sort of narrative. Of course, like the heat is going to come and it's going to really be a big burden. The flood is going to come and it's going to, you know, wipe, you know, there's going to be lots of life. And I come from a disaster background, so it's felt so natural to make people understand how urgent and how dangerous the situation is. The challenge with that is that everyone, it sort of disempowers people. And if someone have the resources in their hand, it also seems like such a complex, big issue that they don't think the resource they have is going to help make so much of a difference compared to if you told them to build a school in a village and kids will have access to classroom and they can learn. It seems a bit more direct and a bit more easier, and they can go be happy about themselves, as opposed to if you're telling them that, you know, we've overshoot our carbon budget as a whole world, and that means that, you know, the death rate is going to be this much and all of that. It's just so big and so wide that it's almost disempowering. So I think that is the issue that we have. And in doing that, we tell a people story, but the people story we tell, and coming back to the intersectionality here, the people story we tell in climate is typically linked to impacts as opposed to thriving, happiness, well-being, and all the things that any philanthropist would want to do. So if you would just take that people story, which we tell now, but we tell it more around the fact of how the impact of climate change is going to affect people, but we will tell it more around how, you know, how people or communities are going to be able to transform or are able to have all these beautiful narratives or changes or thriving or success because we could unlock X amount of money to support their work. I think that generally makes it better, and people can see the intersectionality of it as opposed to when it's not so much of a positive news. So a good example is when you are able to, for instance, link disability to climate impact, which is a very huge problem within the disaster field. So people fund emergency response. And I remember there was one fundraising meeting where I talked about, have any of you in this room thought when there is flooding and there's evacuation, have you ever thought what happened to people in wheelchairs? That make people immediately think, okay, no, so many people think about it. But we expect that the experts will know that this is an issue and they should deal with it. But if you would just say that if we're able to support a policy led by people who are differently able, and if they are able to work with their policymakers to be able to create conditions that is better for them, that means that they're able to support themselves, their family, and the people around, the people they love. It's a better story than, oh, the flood is going to come and every person who is in a wheelchair is going to die if you don't do this. Then they start imagining sort of such a huge context, because it's no longer people in wheelchairs, also people who probably cannot see, are not able to hear properly, visually impaired, and then they really feel disempowered. So for me, I think one of the main things that we've missed in the climate narrative, beyond the major things like focusing it on carbon and all these other terminologies and things that are not really relatable to humans, is taking the human story, but not making it about the impact on them and making it about how better they're going to be if we're able to move resources to them. And I think that generally allow people to give, as opposed to if they feel like it's such a huge issue that their money wouldn't make so much of a difference on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think just to feed off of that a little bit, when it comes to, or when we think about really effective storytelling, I think something we, especially with like the newness of so much terminology that's out there too, I think language evolves and that is important. New terminology is important. And at the same time, I think it's important that stories feel like home. And that's not something that a lot of climate science spaces do particularly well. And I think as programmatic leaders that do have to communicate out the importance of our programs and the communities that our programs serve, it's important to, again, it goes back to kind of being an effective facilitator. I think it's important to be able to facilitate the science that you know is really important, the data that you know is really critical, in a way, to Joshua's point, that is empowering, and also through storytelling mediums that feel like home, right? If people feel more called to a small animated video than they do a black and white research paper from XYZ University, then that's what it might take to be able to get people to feel connected to a story. I think that's really important. IE has a YouTube video. It's called An Intersectional History of Environmentalism. And it's just it's like a 12-minute adorable animated primer. And it has been, I think it's going to hit 50K streams this year. It's been used by professors, teachers, educators, students, organizers, and it's been used by teams within corporations just to like sit around and watch it together, just to spark conversation and dialogue. And that video was, I think, we released it in 2020, at the end of 2021. And this was still like very much at the height of COVID. And at the time, it's still doing really well. But at the time, like that was the storytelling medium that our community needed. And so I think that's really important too, when it comes to making sure that people have tools that they need to educate themselves. It's important that we consider that those tools are distributed in a way that feels familiar, comfortable, safe, and yeah, that it feels like home.
Wonderful. That's a great idea at using those tools to begin conversation. I'm going to open it up to the floor. And as Diandra said at the beginning, this is a safe space. There's no silly questions, bad questions, whatever. If you want to comment, I would really invite Myra, Amanda, Kyle, Jessica, Madeline, Alamindra, Sean, Kaneen, Tolani, if she's still in her car, to take yourself off mic and just ask a question or share something that you're feeling or thinking right now.
Can you guys hear me okay right now?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. I don't really have it very well worded right now, but what is coming to mind, my question is kind of surrounding language, like we were talking about in communications. And I have been trying to be more accurate in what I'm saying and more equitable. And so instead of using words like disadvantaged or minority, I've been trying to lean into actually saying the population or the community group that I'm talking about. So whatever that is, I'm trying to actually label that group instead of saying BIPOC or something larger. But in doing that, I wonder if occasionally I'm losing that intersectionality aspect, like saying Latinx. That might be the majority of the population we're serving, and that might be more specific, but then we might also be serving some people that are then excluded from that Latinx title. And same with indigenous. Like, I don't know, I don't exactly know what I'm trying to say, but how do I try and be specific in the community group I'm talking about while ensuring, like inclusive language? And also, how do you kind of throw in the intersectionality aspect without, like, indigenous communities we work with a lot, and women have generally bear a lot more of the harms that my group is focused on. But yeah, just like, how do you highlight these things without missing all the other people who also have multiple identities that are affecting them, or putting them in ways of more harm, without then forgetting about the rest of the people, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And that's such a valid question that I think a lot of people are asking themselves all the time. I think for us, what really matters is context. So, like, if you're speaking really generally about the work that your organization does and you serve all of these communities, then in that context, it makes sense to speak to all of those communities. But to your point, and it sounds like you're really well aware of this, if you're speaking about a very particular specific context that a specific identity or community group is vulnerable to, and you keep it so like vague or ambiguous by still speaking to all of those communities that your organization serves, you're perpetuating erasure of a group that in that context really needs to be centered and amplified. So one example I'll use is every year people talk about genocide around Thanksgiving time. And we oftentimes will speak very generally about, like, oh, indigenous communities experience XYZ in connection to genocide. And that is true, but Thanksgiving is also a really important time to be able to call direct attention to the Wampanoag peoples and their direct experience in connection to Thanksgiving specifically, and the history that's connected to their experience, because I think people sometimes have a hard time understanding that there are just like a bajillion tribes all over the world. And so by not being specific to a context and a people that experience that context, you can perpetuate erasure unless you are generally speaking to something that typically is more overarching. Does that make sense?
Hey, who else?
I'm Jessica. Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
Question is, our group is interested in some trainings, and so I'm new to your organization and was wondering if you had any offerings. I heard that you were mentioning trainings, and we are our community is in an interesting place where we really are not very integrated. We just have a lot of we're up in the Sierra Foothills, about 1 hour from Sacramento. And so we're trying to be very inclusive, but our problem really is that our community is very a very white community. So we're trying to very, very hard to bring all kinds of people in, and bring in board members that are more varied and all that kind of things. But our problem is that we just don't our community is just not there yet in that sense. So wanting to know if you have any advice for us, and also maybe some trainings for us, our group and our board.
What part of what area did you say you're in? I lived in Sacramento for a year, so I'm curious.
Oh, so we're in Nevada City, like
I
Grass
love
Valley,
Grass
Nevada.
Valley. I love Grass Valley.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we do have Joshua, please feel free to plug anything that you have as well. I'll just pop a link in the chat where you can
Okay.
learn a little bit more about our trainings and reach out to us directly. But yeah, if your team is in like a more of an introductory space, I usually just recommend an intro to intersectional environmentalism. And then some of the things that we offer that are more custom and tailored might continue beyond that to be, which I think is what I recommend for a lot of folks that feel like some teams feel equipped to kind of facilitate this themselves. But if your team is feeling like you need a little bit of support, an intro to IE training can also segue really beautifully into an exploration of communities and groups, and also oftentimes Indigenous peoples that are native to your land that your organization can start to engage and build long-term community with.
Oh, we do have that. Yes, definitely. We are very, and we are on the grounds of the Nisenan and Concow people, I should say. And we do have a very good communication with the tribes. What I was wondering is, we have our group has read the intersectional environmentalists, and they have, especially the board as well, they've actually really appreciated it. So I think that would be a good next follow-up step.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to connect after this as well. And
Great,
did
thank
anybody
you.
else have any other questions?
Nope. Thanks so much.
Advice on getting more youth involved in campaign work in your organization, high school and college. It sounds like Joshua, maybe we start with you, but he and I were actually emailing just before about doing a follow-on community commons session on specifically that question. But Joshua, go ahead and share your thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think that one of the main things I've come to realize when it comes to engaging more younger people, so the high school level, young people in your program, is a lot of patience and having a lot of clarity for yourself, because it comes with a lot of questions for them to understand why this is important, given the urgency and all the things they wish to see resolved and done very fast and very quick immediately. And you having the patience to take them on a journey to get to that point where they see whatever campaign or program you're working on as very important, and as to whether that would actually make a difference in the issues they find very important to them. So working with your team to come up with the clarity for yourself, the roadmap as to how you see this playing in the sort of bigger picture, and why their involvement is relevant is the first. And if not, I think you run the risk of having a lot of young people seeing the campaign, being interested in it, reaching out, but then those questions come up and you're not able to sustain their engagement within your program. So sort of they come in and then they go out and they join something else, and which also fatigue for the youth movement as a whole, because then they can keep moving from one thing to the other, searching for a space where they can really see the progress that they want to see in the issues that they care about. And you want to create a safe space for them for that. But that'll be the sort of quick recommendation I would give.
Yeah, so Talani, thanks for that, and stay tuned for the next, either the next gathering or something we'll be doing in the coming months. Terrance, I see that you joined us, and I'm not sure if there was somebody specific who was with the New Jersey, did they say the New Jersey coast or the port? I can't remember if somebody's still on or if they dropped off. Was there anyone still on here that was with the port? Because I was like, oh, Terrance can't join us. And so I wanted to see if there's a final question or a last minute question we could work in.
No, but let me apologize. We have a I have to present to our board of directors today, and we were having technical issues, and so my supervisors got very nervous, and so we had to troubleshoot. So that's my good poor excuse for not being able to make it. I was definitely looking forward to it, but hopefully we get another opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. So, and Jessica, you did anticipate one of the final questions that I had, and that was, how can we get in touch with perhaps your three organizations, get more training, get better, working together as nonprofit organizations in support of our bigger goals? How might you sort of close up here and offer some of those ideas?
Yeah, I think that beyond some of the thoughts and ideas that Joshua and I have shared, I think when it comes to maybe connecting with our team anyway, a lot of that usually looks like obviously trainings, but it also looks like collaborative resources that we can disseminate to youth audiences and beyond. We really love intergenerational resource development. That's really important. And I think that beyond that, we're also really, really passionate about making sure that grassroots and intersectional organizations all over the country can be featured in IE's new database. We just launched a database in April during Earth Month in recognition that so many of the organizers that we've been supporting and working alongside and amplifying for the past few years don't get enough visibility within the movement, largely because historically databases end up with restrictions like you have to have 501c3 status, or no one knew you existed, but no one means those who are traditionally a little bit more disconnected to what's happening on the ground. Joshua's laughing, you know what I mean? So yeah, we're really excited about our database. It's already had a really huge impact. And if making sure that organizers that you work with are featured on that database and really identify with grassroots intersectional work, would love to chat.
Great. Joshua?
Yeah, I'll just put my email and my website in the chat for those who want to keep connected, to stay connected. We do organize a couple of events along the year in New York during Climate Week, and then another one along the year, and we bring funders together to do a workshop on intersectionality and how to fund better for communities. And it's just a part of our learning journey to get the sort of funders and people who are very disconnected to get a bit more space to learn and to hear from the ground, and have greater chance for us to influence the way they do things as well. And we can share resources around that also with folks who want to do this with their board or their partners or funders. Yeah, so that is it from my side, and thank you so much for the invitation. Also, Diandra, this is really amazing work and really nice to yeah, get to know more about your work as well. Yeah.
Terrance?
I'm not sure. Let me come. Can you come back to me?
Sure. Well, we're getting close to wrapping up, but we can follow up with folks who RSVP'd on ways to get involved or learn more, and better understand how we can integrate all of this good knowledge into our, how we walk the earth, I think ultimately is what it comes, because what Diandra and Joshua showed us, that it sometimes it's the smallest thing that we can do that really then amplifies and spreads. And I would say that that's what we're trying to do. I'm very, I come into this space as somebody new and somebody very curious. And at the core, it's about understanding that my two kids, who are 25 and 23 right now, are inheriting something really challenging. And yet I guess my success is that they have shown up as really good humans and caring for one another. And all of my life, I have really found that building community comes together. So for example, last night I wrapped up my 17th year of doing a women's salon for deep conversation, getting to know one another in a very safe space. And we've talked about every topic you can imagine. And last night, my daughter presented about intimacy, relationships, and that kind of therapy and that kind of work. So at the core of what Earth Gives is about, because this is how I feel successful in the world, is building community. So I really, really appreciate the trust that Terrance and Diandra have had with me, and Joshua coming in, and all of you supporting this little idea of building a community of Earth Givers. We just happen to be doing it through the first US-wide Giving Day focused on climate justice, and the environment, to say that the inequities of investment are not there to meet the moment. And so I invite you all to come together to bring other 501c3s or fiscally sponsored organizations to join us for Earth Gives Day, because we believe that together we can amplify our voices and get the attention, and then invite people to identify as an Earth Giver in however that works, how they serve their neighbors, like I said off the top, how they serve those in the global South, how they make decisions, how they use their voice, how they vote, how they volunteer, and how they give. And so I am so thankful for all the teachers that I'm getting to learn from, like all of you, as we journey, and I played my little role in this work. So thank you for joining us for this Community Commons Impact Maker session. And I'm gonna pass it on to whoever would like to sort of leave a closing word, a note, a thought, a poem that you might want to offer for this gathering.
But since I was late, I would say real leaders take actions where others hesitate. I think that this is a room where we are at, say, a crossroad between opportunity and crisis. We can blend in and do what everyone has been doing, or we can take bold actions to bring about what I call transformational change versus just transactional change. And so that is both my prayer and my commitment to the work.
Joshua, you want to have any final thought?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that you've done amazing work creating such an intimate and trusted space, and it feels very great being able to be part of this. So really thanks to all of you who came, and yeah, looking forward to more of this in the future. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Diandra, bring us home.
Yeah, I think giving a nod back to the conversation earlier about the importance, the critical nature of just playing a small part through the funny little Instagram reel that I watched, I would just say be ready to hold the lamp. Hold the lamp, make the sandwich, drive the car, do the small things.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I wish you a great rest of your day and week, and we hope you continue to see you on the journey forward. Thank you for all your work.